Volume 6 C28. Astraka sat in his command tent and listened to the scout report. Unexpectedly an elf. He knelt before the Duke, ignoring the human guards as he made his report. "And that is what I found, Duke Astraka." "I see, so they did get around us. They must have ranged very far. We will have to extend our lines. But if they don't want us to bring our own supplies, we will have to take their own," Duke Astraka remarked in an off-handed way. He then looked to the guard at his right hand. The command tent was what one would have expected, a fine chair for the leader, nothing for the rest, a wooden table that could be assembled and disassembled with ease thanks to its mobile legs, a map of the immediate region, and tan fabric from which a few glowstones hung from small strings to light the dim room. Give the elf enough for 3 days' travel and send him back to his unit. 3 days? The guard asked, half dismayed at the command, his hand tensing around his halberd. "He may have to take a circuitous route to get back alive," Astraka explained while he stood up. The elf raised his eyes in shock at the evident generosity. Thank you, my lord." The elf was gone with his escort a moment later. "Get the army moving," Astraka said, "pack up camp, and put the word out to the other commanders. We're going mobile now, no more large encampments." His guard, true to form, was also a senior leader in his own right, and the metal of his expensive helmet clinked as he took a step back as if to withdraw from the order. "My lord, are we not going to open our supply lines again?" Astraka shook his head. "And face Gustav Montagna in open battle? With tens of thousands of paladins and squires? Absolutely not. Our army isn't seasoned enough for that. The north is a hard place, Count Richin, a very hard place. Demi-human incursions, year-round training. We haven't a prayer against the army they can leverage against us. Not as we are. That is why I went to the Queen of Frost for help. Giving up elven slaves, opening up trade, these are minor concessions for victory." "Sire." Count Richin was a vigorous, powerfully built young man, broad as a farm boy and a talented warrior with dark brown hair and hazel eyes, and a long confidant of Duke Astraka. "You heard me, Richin," Astraka said. "The slave rebellion proves we can't hold them. We should have just used short-term criminals or even paid workers. Keeping elf slaves around just so the mining magnates could keep their labor costs low. How many hostages do the elves have to keep us honest now?" "Many," Richin remarked and drew his lips tight across his face. "Exactly. Getting them back will seal the deal with the rest of the nobles, remaining friendly with the elves for when they abandon us." Astraka laughed when Richin's mouth opened and no sound came out. "Of course they're going to abandon us. We enslaved their men, raped their women, used them like toys. I have no doubt at all that they'll go over to the Queen of Frost as soon as they can." He pointed at the places on the map the reports came from. "They're ranging farther away than they need to in order to support us. I thought at first it was because they didn't like humans, but look at the path they're taking." He traced his hands along the paper, directly to the Queen of Frost. "Well, indirectly, but nonetheless they will intersect if nothing changes. When they do, we'll lose our scouts, but I think we will get back their hostages." "Duke Astraka, perhaps you should be the king, not Prince Caspond." Count Richin said it with a smile, but the Duke shook his head. "No. I'm not interested in kingship. I want only what is best for my country, and Queen Kalka's rule. It is proving a poor fit for all of us, north and south alike. If she concedes to her brother, I'm happy to go back home and rule in peace for the rest of my life," he said and stretched his arms out once. "Now, get us moving. We're going to start hitting towns for supplies. Gustav may have cut off our supplies, but he can't go south. It's far easier to defend than to attack. Meanwhile we can go everywhere. He's expecting us to try to take that position back, instead. I'm going to move on Prat. Take it by surprise, and all the supplies they have, and then go east. Let him chase us down if he wants. We'll be long gone by the time he realizes what I've done." "My lord is as clever as ever." Count Richin's grin was big on his face and his steps were quick, long, and confident as he left the tent to give the Duke's orders to the army. Kellet watched her queen depart with a foreign king, and inside the breast of the second most powerful woman in the Roble Holy Kingdom, a heart tore in two. But she kept her face stoic, stern, and strode on steady steps as measured as any dancer's until she was at the head of the table. "Matters of state keep the queen occupied with our king," she said while standing ramrod straight and holding aloft a crystal goblet of dark wine. She smiled brightly when eyes turned to face her while her own torn open heart turned to ashes in her breast. Her hand raised the crystal chalice and held it out as the nobles both knew and the few surviving old, raised their own and stood on their feet. We drink to the new future of our nation. From the ashes of this war will rise a phoenix, and may we all rise with it. May we all rise. The noble men and women of the Holy Kingdom, many of whom came from the senior ranks of the military, and others from the wealthiest merchants, all shouted their toast in unison, and meant it. My queen. I hope he is gentle with you, as I would have been, and treasures you, as I would have. I hope she killed the thought, screeching in pain like a mad woman in her own head, stabbing the thought over and over again. She could not wish for him to love her queen, or for her queen to love him. It was never going to be. She told herself, and began struggling to let go, like a drowning woman clinging to a rope, and deciding she would no longer try to pull herself to safety, only to find that she was tangled up in it and couldn't let go even if she wanted to. It will all work out. For the kingdom. For the kingdom. That's what matters. The brown-haired young caster told herself, and told herself, and told herself, crying inside while holding her crystal glass so tightly that it cracked between her fingers as she, and all of the other nobles new and old alike, got thoroughly drunk, slumping over their tables or under them, for very, very different reasons. Come on. Let's get you to bed, Ileana said to the thoroughly drunk human. She rose, a little unsteady on her feet, but compared to Skarna, who slumped forward with glassy eyes and swaying back and forth in her chair, she may as well have been the most graceful of dancers. How are you sober? Sober? Skarna sounded out the question and let out a little hiccup. I knows we drank same stuff. I've been drinking liquor since before your great-great-great-grandmother first got into some fermented apples, Ileana said with a silvery, slightly drunken laugh. An elf could even drink a dwarf under the table by the time they're my age. She went over to the pretty human companion, stood beside her, and then crouched down. I'm not as strong as you are, so I'm going to have to walk you, Ileana explained while Skarna nodded along. She put one of Skarna's arms over her shoulder and then put her arms around the woman's waist, then stood her up on her feet. Just try to walk with me as best you can. Skarna did as the elf wanted. She tried to move her feet. No fair. Cheatin' by being so long livin'. Could drink you under the table if I had time. Jou time. Skarna's glassy eyes fixed on the elf as they walked, or rather, staggered into the bedroom of the expensive suite. Sorry. Real sorry, Skarna mumbled as the elf got her over to the bed and flopped her down. For what? Ileana asked while she began to undo Skarna's bootlaces and pulled them off the woman's feet and tossed the brown leather to thud down on the floor. Skarna abruptly lurched and vomited both the earlier meal and the wine out onto both herself and the bed. Ileana sighed, and Skarna said it again. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. It's just vomit. It's nothing I haven't seen or made before, Ileana said with a good-natured laugh before going over to where the wash basin sat and dampening a cloth. She returned and wiped the brown fabric over Skarna's face and then wiped up the vomit stain off of the fur of the bedding as best she could, ignoring the chunks of half-digested meat and bread and the foul sour smell before dumping them into the chamber pot. She wiped her hands clean. Skarna was still repeating the same 3 words when Ileana returned and began to undo the laces of Skarna's vomit-stained shirt. Come on, stop apologizing for whatever it is, and let's get you taken care of. Skarna's body was hard to the touch, harder than Ileana expected. The drunken woman cooperated as much as she could. Come on, I'm not going to leave you soaking in your own vomit all night, Ileana said and slowly pulled the steel-like arms out of their sleeves. How on earth are you so strong? Skarna laughed. Dunno. Dancin'. Play fightin'. Schwords, pretty good. Got Michelle Bader to show me stuff when you were out. Hurt like I. Oh. Ileana replied. It seemed strange for a woman who so proudly and often proclaimed she cared for nothing but pleasure. Was it for fun or? Skarna shook her head and flopped back on the bed, heedless of her bare breasts heaving with every deep breath. "'Cause I like you," she said, and drifted off to sleep, leaving Ileana behind with more questions than answers. Strange girl, Ileana laughed and recalled how many of her past clients were thoroughly drunk, and how to treat them. She rolled the human onto her side and ignored the sound of snoring when it began to cut like a double-headed saw through a tree trunk. "All right, so I won't sleep great tonight, at least I won't have a hangover in the morning. She managed one more laugh at herself before running her hand over the glowstone by the bed, and plunging the room into darkness before drifting off to sleep beside her companion. Volume 6 C29. Albedo refused to cut off the mirror of remote viewing. A tiny part of her was annoyed with the human that was on top of, underneath, and alongside the Supreme Being. Their limbs entwined in a state of steady lust slaking hunger. The human, she sneered at, appraising her as a woman appraised competition, and tilted her chin up in arrogance the queen could not see as Albedo found the woman wanting. Perhaps not bad as humans go, but nothing compared to my divinely given perfection. And I require no makeup or artifice. Albedo chuckled while the woman cried out as the Allfather found his rhythm. That was what caught Albedo's eye more than anything else, what pleased her lord, what he desired, what he wanted, what were his habits. At first glance, he seemed so uncertain. His touch went out toward her as if he was a child afraid of touching fire. As if it might hurt him, his eyes wide as if he had never seen naked femininity before. I would think he was a virgin. But that's impossible. For our Lord to have never had such bliss. It's unthinkable. She shook her head hard enough to make her ink dark hair dance, her wings trembled, her hands drifted unthinkingly over her own body as she imagined her own hands as his. The beings of Nazarick were not bound by the petty human concerns of monogamy or fidelity. The Supreme Being was supreme, and could do as he liked. This woman, as Albedo saw her, was no threat. I will be perfect forever. Her life will end in the span of a breath compared to my immortality. So it was nothing to the demoness that embodied the word lust. Only an object lesson in what her lord liked, but it did provoke the question that still haunted Albedo's mind. How to get him to see me as more than the child of Lord Tabulus Marabdina? She moaned, her mind at once on her lustful self-explorations while she watched her lord claim a kingdom in the bedchamber of the embodiment of it, but also on the dilemma that lay beyond. Albedo's hips undulated and her pheromones increased. It was only her desire that this all be private to her that kept her from screaming when the woman did. If my lord was innocent. He is a quick study. She teased her mind as she teased her body until at last her lord finished claiming the Roble Holy Kingdom, for so she saw the act. The queen of that country lay limp and satiated. But Albedo was only beginning. And there was only one place she wanted to be when she finished. She whirled on her heels and hastened to the bed of the Allfather of Nazarick, the only place in the world she wanted to be, except in the arms of her lord. Queen Kalka lay in the arms of the man she prepared to call her king. Her arms trailed over his chest, his heart was still racing there. She tilted her head to look up at him. For all her prior innocence, she knew a look of guilt when she saw one. "My lord?" she asked with a whisper, her other hand pushed against the soft bare fur so that she sat up on her side. Sweat ran down her bosom to fall on his skin when she leaned over him just a little. "Is something troubling you?" "Many things," Ayn said, only for his eyes to widen a little when she laughed. "You're not feeling like you took advantage of me, are you? Or that you were taken advantage of?" She raised a brow as if to say, "I know you enjoyed it if that was the case." Ainz only looked at her while he tried to frame words for something he could not fully explain even in his own mind. His left hand came over and pressed her wandering fingers down so that her palm was flat on his slick chest. "Ainz, I trust you don't mind if I call you that now." She smirked a little, fairly daring him to mind. He shook his head. "Ainz, if that is the problem. I am a queen, you are a king. This is how such things are settled. We each gain something for our people. This is a bloodless victory for us both. Maybe I dreamed of a life with my Kellet." But his eyes flicked away from her face, and she cut herself off. Oh, that isn't it, is it, Ainz?" Queen Kalka asked. Her little rosy smirk became a tiny frown, her hand pressed a little harder over his heart. "You are like me, aren't you? Not that other way. I mean in that there is someone else you love?" Ainz turned his eyes back to her face, their lustrous hue as bright as a cat in the dark. He started to say and then said nothing. "Call it a woman's intuition. Tell me about her. Is she some peasant in your kingdom? Or the illegitimate daughter of a noble?" She chuckled a little. "Or is she not even human?" Ainz shifted a little under her touch. It was Kalka's turn for her eyes to widen. "Not human. This explains a great deal." The human queen looked away from him and then sat up. She faced the distant door and set her bedmate at her back. "This is a political matter. I don't expect you to love me. I doubt I will even see you often after you have done what you came here for, Kalka said and slumped forward a little, her hands in her lap. But still, this is a surprise. So, will you at least tell me something about her? I shared my secret, will you let me wonder about what kind of woman has captured the heart of my king? Kalka asked, but still did not face him. Ainz's heart raced faster and faster as she riddled out his private thoughts, and at least a large part of his sense of guilt. His hand came out, he rolled to his side, hesitant at first. She didn't look back at the noise of his rustling, not even when his hand pressed against her upper back and began to rub up and down. Ainz snapped his mouth shut. Go on. If she is not something to be ashamed of, at least we can confide in each other. Kalka encouraged him, and turned to the side, sliding her legs against the edge of the bed and taking the hand that was caressing her back. She's the child of one of my dearest friends. Ainz replied in haste, throwing the words out faster than he could stop himself. He does not approve? Or would not if he knew? Kalka pressed, a sympathetic voice matched by finally looking down at where he lay. If I am being honest, I don't know. He is gone. Long gone. I hoped I would see him again after he left, but it's been too long. I just can't believe he's returning now. She was left in my care, like all the others. My comrades, they left their children behind, and their children became mine, and now? Ainz snorted as he vented for the first time. Kalka lay back down on the bed then, inching close to him, so that their faces were close enough that she could feel his breathing caress her cheek. Now she is an adult. Beautiful, and in love with you. And she's from noble stock, I assume, but you see only the child? Kalka guessed, and the truth lanced through him like sunlight-piercing night. Yes. But there is more, he said, the weight of his action pressed on his chest and forced the words to flow off of his tongue. I did something terrible to her. Kalka frowned. You didn't molest her, did you? Ainz violently shook his head, so much so that his loose dark hair whipped audibly against the sheets. No, he insisted, then closed his eyes. Worse. Worse? Kalka frowned a little and kissed his forehead. Go on, if I'm to be your wife. I'm to be a more intimate confessor than a priest. Magic. I am capable of magic of the sort you can't even begin to fathom. Magic beyond even what your gods could use. Ainz admitted, and Kalka only held her tongue. The story of the battle on the Katza Plains had long since reached her ears, and all investigations of just what spell or even tier of spell he used, had come up empty. What did they say? Even the most wild stories about the gods had nothing like this. You don't believe me? He asked. She put an arm over his body. He was so warm. She inched herself closer and pressed her lips to his. The kiss she gave to him was long, deep, passionate, and she rolled him on his back and herself over top of him, pressing her breasts to his chest, and only then did she break it. You are the most powerful magic caster in the world, Kalka said with confidence as she arched her back over him and then straddled him at the waist, but I just pinned you. She gave him a playful wink and let out a little gilded laugh at his surprised expression. She then put a hand on his cheek and said, magic comes in many forms, and this is one of them. We researched your spell, the one you used at the Katza Plains against Baharuth, and we found nothing like it in even the wildest of our stories that even the priests consider mere myths. If you tell me it is greater than the gods, I am prepared to believe it. Ainz's body relaxed under the queen. She lay herself down on top of him, pressing her ear over his heart to listen to its beating. So, what has this to do with what you think you've done? Ainz went on, in a particular place at a particular time, some kinds of magic could be done, and just as easily undone. She was with me, and I. No words exist for this, but I used one of those magics on her. It was a mere whim, something I thought would never matter because I could immediately undo it. But then, the magic, I guess I could say it died, it was sealed away, perhaps that's the better way to say it. But either way, it is gone and even the gods couldn't unlock it again. You made her love you, didn't you? Kalka's words were not said as a question, more like an accusation, and Ainz accepted it as such. Yes. I took who she was, and made her something she wasn't, and I can't fix it. I was entrusted with her care, and I destroyed her. Ainz put the back of his hand over his eyes. I did a terrible thing, and compounded it by putting distance between us that tortured and tormented her. I was a selfish fool. And I don't know how to make it right. I don't think it even can be made right. Kalka took that in, and listened to the rapid, jagged heartbeat. If she had any doubts about the truthfulness of her future husband, they died with what she heard inside his chest. The power of a god. And the foolishness of man. What a combination. Kalka thought and began to kiss the place where his heart lay, pressing the warmth of her lips there again and again. She was fairly sure his hand was covering up quiet tears. She wanted to see, wanted to know. Her eyes looked up his length from where she kissed the flesh over his heart. More than once her hands inched forward along his side, ready to take his wrist and pull it away. Part of her was sure, he wouldn't stop me, even though he can. But pride was prickly, and her own heart felt near to bursting in her breast. I killed my first horse, Kalka said out of the blue. What? Ines asked. I don't understand. Kalka rushed her words, pushing herself up against his body so that she hovered over him. My horse. When I was little, Father gave me a beautiful horse. I loved it very much. I would spend hours brushing her mane, feeding her. She had a pure white coat, and bright, big eyes. Most horses are actually stupid, did you know that? This one though, it was smart. I could see it thinking, if you know what I mean. I did everything with her. I wouldn't even let our servants wash her or rub her down. She was my greatest treasure. I took her out a lot. I practically grew up in her saddle. Kalka laughed at the pleasant memory, then fell quiet. I took her out one day though. I was riding with one of my father's retainers. We went far, far out of the usual range. I think I was mad at my father about something. Something inconsequential now, or it must have been, since I don't even remember it. But because we rode so far, and it was to an area I didn't know well, we ran into trouble. My father's retainer warned me it could be dangerous, but I was so mad I didn't listen. A rain came on, really hard, fast. We tried to find shelter. And then near a river, part of the channel broke, and my horse fell in. My retainer, he grabbed me off of the saddle and saved my life. But my horse? Kalka shook her head. I saw her screaming whinny while she was swept away in the current. I struggled in the retainer's arms, but he held me tight and put me in front of him on his horse and got us away from the river. That was an accident, Ines pointed out. You did nothing wrong. If it was just me not listening to my retainer, maybe I would agree, Kalka said with a quiet, childlike voice. But after the rain stopped, I demanded that we go look for her, and now that I was out of danger, he was obedient. He raced down the river, and we found her an hour later. She was battered, bruised, broken, bleeding. Broken tree limbs ran through her body like wooden spears. She was just flailing in the now damp riverbed. Just screaming the way dying animals do, kicking around like mad, trying to get up, but she couldn't, Kalka said and paused to wipe her eyes. She let out a loud sniffle and swallowed with a deep gulp before going on. She was suffering. Hurting so badly, I wanted to get a healer, a caster. I tried to tell the retainer. Kalka clenched her fists and turned her knuckles into a deeper shade of white, but he asked me, for her, or for you? And at first I wanted to scream at him. But then I knew what he meant. She was dying. She was suffering. I could send for a healer, but there was no way one would make it in time. We didn't have any potions, I didn't know any herbalism and neither did he. So, I held out my hand. He gave me his sword. Kalka held up her left hand. It was big, compared to me. A knight's long sword doesn't weigh a lot, but they're big, and I'm sure I looked ridiculous, tramping through the mud holding a sword. I went around behind my horse, put the tip to her chest where I was sure I could hit the heart between her ribs, and pushed. Kalka swallowed. I loved her, and I destroyed her. She isn't a horse. Ines pointed out and let his hand come away from his face to come up and brush Kalka's tears away from the corners of her eyes. No, my lord. But while you did do something bad, you're not taking responsibility for it either. You said it yourself, you put her at a distance and all it did was torment her. If there is no cure, nothing you can do to change it back. Isn't it kinder to embrace it? You can't kill her like I did my horse. But you can make it right by accepting what's in her now. Kalka pointed out, and patted his cheek. You may be the most powerful man in the world, but when it comes to the heart, you're a fool, she said, but she said it with a forgiving smile as if she expected as much. Ines took all that in. I thought he finally began, but she again cut him off. I think I like you, Ines, Kalka said, and tittered a little. That is a relief. I admit I was worried I wouldn't. But you thought wrong. There's no need to finish that sentence. Now that we like each other, can you manage a few more times before we sleep? I keep feeling like we're being watched. And it feels naughty. I kind of like it. Silly though, isn't it? She laughed a little and took his manhood in hand to slip into her folds again. Ein sighed as he felt the tight embrace of her body again, and shared in her amusement and then in their mutual enjoyment. Until just after she drifted off to sleep when the thought came to mind, the mirror? But what are the odds, he wondered, that Albedo was really watching? Lo, he was sure, and thus reassured by lying to himself, he drifted off to sleep, and in his slumber, he felt black wings and arms as soft as silk and stronger than steel, embrace him, and Albedo's voice was in his ear. Make love to me, she urged, and his night began again through dreams. Volume 6 C30. The smell of smoke was thick in the air, but despite that, Nia stayed a ways back from the flames, if anything, much farther than she needed to, over near Olisur Dark. So, she said, looking up at her companion with a playful smile, I guess not caring much for fire goes with the rest of. She waved her hand up and down her body. This? Yes. He remarked in his rough sort of way. Had he been human, or even demi-human, he might have shrugged as if to say you are not missing anything. I stay alive, get stronger than I dreamed, and get to fly. But I don't like fire anymore. Nia tapped a taloned finger on her chin and looked away in a mockery of deep thought. Yeah, fair trade. She lagged and smacked the dragon on the talon. I really can't thank you enough, but with all that said. Nia looked past the burning husk of an empty town. Why isn't she chasing us yet? Could she not have figured out your plan? Olisur Dark asked. Nia frowned. She is an idiot, but even if Gustav is off fighting Astraka in the west, my line of march should be obvious. Oh. Wait. No. She really is that stupid. Nia smacked her face with the palm of her hand. If Gustav were with her he would have worked it out. Anyone else, even if they figured it out, nobody would want to actually tell her and risk making her mad. So, what will you do? Olisur Dark asked. Nia thought it over. Standard practice for the Holy Kingdom is probing attacks, so she will probably send out a battalion-sized element to the rear somewhere, using Kalinsha as the headquarters. It was stupid of me to think she would be smart enough or bold enough to predict me. Even if it was obvious. Couldn't it be some clever stratagem? Olisur Dark asked. My son, when he was alive, read a great deal, and talked often about cunning little folk who used strategy as a replacement for physical strength. Nia put her hand on his talon. Olisur Dark seldom spoke of his former life as a mountain lord, but bits and pieces she picked up from him while tending his wounds had teased out something of a story. I'm very sorry for your loss. I'm sure he died bravely. I'm sure they all did. Dragons, as she knew of them, did not have the same depth of bonds that humans felt, but in those moments when Olisur Dark spoke of them, she felt sure she heard some bit of contentment in his words. Think nothing of it, they were. This world devours weakness. The Demon Emperor has the mountain now. If they are lucky, they are dead. If the rest of us are, Yaldabaoth is content with just the mountains. Nia cleared her throat. We can only hope. But no, Remedios is an idiot. There's nothing clever about her, but stupidity can be unpredictable. Still, if she doesn't have scouts coming in, then beyond our little smoke signals she's blind. That means she'll follow doctrine and try to probe us. She brought her fingers to her lips and blew a shrill, high whistle. Vijar, she shouted, and the giant saber-toothed catman emerged from amidst the smoke of the burning town. Caught in his light grayish-blue fur were chunks of wood and other debris, but no blood. His broad dual-headed axe was resting over his shoulder as he swaggered out, his ears twitching while the thunderous noise of a crashing and collapsing building came out behind him. "My queen?" he asked. His thick dark lips drew back as his jaw opened. It gave him a peculiar-looking smile almost that Nia was sure couldn't have been the same meaning as it would have on a human's face. "The bitch hasn't chased us yet, so I think she'll send out a group to try to grab us by the tail and give us a tug. Take some of your best, lay an ambush and—" Nia hesitated. "Get it together. This is necessary. There's nothing different about killing humans than anything else," she told herself, and then said, "Don't worry about survivors. At least not many," she said, and then explained her intent, leaving the giant catman's tail dancing behind him. "Your Majesty, I will carry out your will. But," He reached down and took his tail in hand. Would they really pull this? Naya's stern face fell apart into laughter as the catman stroked his long furry tail. Vijay. Just go, and come back alive. If you do encounter Remedios herself, be careful. Naya's face managed a brief moment of seriousness at least. She is an idiot, but an extremely dangerous idiot. Vijay gave a slow nod and let go of his tail. My queens will be done, he said, and left them behind. Gustav sat in his command tent, or what was now his command tent, formerly belonging to the unfortunate enemy commander. Hours after his victory, he recalled his elation, big smiles, drinks all around from the southern stores of beer, even a feast. Now? Days later? My scouts aren't getting anything and the Duke hasn't made any attempt to come and rout me out of his supply lines. What is he thinking? That left a vexed frown on his face and he stared at the map, willing his enemy to appear on it. Where is he? General Gustave Montagne's voice bellowed out and his fist went up, then down on the table hard enough to splinter a chunk off to spatter down in the mud that coated his feet. Outside, thunder rolled on, rain again. This is the third day in a row. I hate this part of the kingdom. I swear. He swept his fist out, opening it just in time to take the mug of beer in hand. It sloshed out, some wetting the cloth map, some landing in the churned-up earth, the rest. He guzzled and then wiped his beard with the back of his hand. At least no new supplies are making it north, I can be sure of that. He thought with some satisfaction, taking the fight into the south with the river cutting through Yanana and the fortifications standing defiantly. It rubbed him the wrong way. But what can I do? I could take the city but I would lose thousands by doing it. He got up and went to the keg, more southern stuff. Outside, soldiers were busy milling about. He could hear the clinking armor, their idle chatter as they went about their duties to prepare for the inevitable fight. The mug filled rapidly when he pressed the lever. The dark amber liquid had a rich smell that had him smacking his lips before he got a second taste. The worst part of war is the dying, the second worst part is the food, the third worst part is the waiting, and the only good part is the winning. He recited the old mantra his mentor once gave to him. Crazy old coot. Gustav grinned a little and raised a mug to the otherwise empty tent. Here's to you, old man, wherever the gods sent you. He drank deeply, dead for at least 10 years. The old man's wisdom was useful many times over, having won battles against superior forces more than once by way of cunning and trickery, and he was a total card cheat. Gustav recalled the time he caught the old gaffer hiding a card up his sleeve, only to be undone by the card hidden in the old man's boot. Gustav put a hand on his belly and laughed before taking a deep drink, and as the beer ran down his throat, he stopped laughing. The old man would never attack me here. Waiting for him. With an inferior force. So. Maybe Duke Astraka wouldn't either. Then where? He cursed his lack of scouts and threw the mug down into muck after draining its contents. It splashed down and was thoughtlessly kicked away as Gustav hunched over the map again. Thunder rolled on outside, and was quickly followed by the noise of a downpour. Where would I go if I was him? No. I can worry about that later. Gustav rushed to the flap of the tent and poked his head out. One of the white-clad guards that would be recognized as one of his personal escorts whirled around and saluted with a metallic clang of mailed fist against armor. Sir. The soldier snapped out the words, but Gustav barely slowed to return the salute. Go get all of my senior officers, and tell them to first get their soldiers to pack up. We've got to be ready to move, and quick, there's no time to lose. But sir, the storm. The soldiers shouted over the thunder. We're paid to deal with storms, soldier, Gustav bellowed. Now go. Gustav then ducked back into the tent when he was satisfied to see the soldier begin to run, splashing through the rain to convey orders. With that done, Gustav returned to the map and tried to think of where his enemy might have gone. Where are you hiding, you clever son of a bitch? He wondered out loud, and searched the quiet drawing for the answers as if they lay hidden within. Volume 6 C31. Ein's eyes fluttered, his lashes batting fast as a butterfly's wings. Something felt strange. Good. But. He looked around. This isn't Nazarick. The furnishings were, by old-world standards, marvelous. Intricate ornately carved wooden dressers, a glass mirror, oval-shaped with golden trim with a white ivory carved-in stool in front. Makeup counter. I don't have a makeup counter. Oh. Wait. The feeling grew more intense. He heard a faint slurping noise. His eyes flew wide and he lifted the blanket to find the Holy Queen's mouth between his legs, focused on his manhood. "Good morning," she laughed at the dumbfounded, open-mouthed, wide-eyed look on his face and sat up, flipping the fur blanket off of them both. "Some of you woke up before the rest of you, and I'm told that this is the best way to make sure a man wakes up happy." She gave a teasing little smile and stretched out with her arms overhead while still kneeling at his side. Her hair snapped out once at the sharp gesture and then tumbled down again. "Gee, good morning," Ayn stammered, and Kalka's smile disappeared, becoming a little more serious. "Are you? How do you feel? It was your first time too, wasn't it?" she asked, and Ayn's face blazed a bright red. "I thought so." She patted his chest reassuringly and said, "It's okay, nobody will hear it from me. Everybody has a first time, and you were mine too." "It wasn't what I expected, but it wasn't what I was afraid of either," she said with an arch little grin on her face. "Ah, yes, well." Ainz rubbed his face and looked away while trying not to respond too eagerly to the way her hand was moving up and down his shaft. I thank you. I wanted us both to enjoy it. I didn't know you were that way, I mean, and if I had." Kalka arched her back and laughed, patting his chest with her unoccupied hand again. "You would have refused me?" She gave him an arch look and waved that hand up and down the length of her naked, shapely form. Ain's blush intensified again just as it was fading. "Ah, well, it's just." Kalka shook her head. "We are the monarchy, we must produce an heir to the throne and protect our people. If it were not you, I would have likely ended up having to marry Duke Astraka to end his civil war and secure my status and then throw back the demi-humans, if we could even manage it as one united kingdom. I can't begin to guess about that." She pursed her lips. Her hand had continued to work his manhood while they spoke. "You're a good king, that's good enough. We don't have to love each other, just our children, when you go back, and leave me behind after everything is done. If you can love your woman without loathing her for it, do so. I won't mind. Just make sure we prepare this kingdom for everything it will need. All else to me just doesn't matter." She then covered his mouth in a kiss, straddled him, and they groaned together as she was filled again. How long their copulating might have gone on was questionable, hours upon hours, perhaps most of the day, but they were prevented from it after some time by a steady knock on the door. Kalka ignored it at first, rocking back and forth atop her chosen mate, raking her nails over a chest that may as well have been iron, but the door continued to thud with the pounding from the other side. "The queen is occupied," she finally yelled. "My queen. It's important." Kellett's voice, muffled as it was, came through the other side. Kalka's face transformed in that instant. Her moment of pleasure became almost instant heartbreak. Her lips were shaking like leaves in the breeze when she looked down at the king, her face a quiet plea with her eyes darting from him to the door and back again. "Go," Ian said nonchalantly as he could manage. "This is all a bit much for me anyway." He told himself and waited while the queen went and threw on a robe and rushed to the locked door. Ainz pulled the blanket over himself to conceal his nakedness while the queen bound a pink silk robe tight at the waist and pulled her hair out from within the confines of the cloth. She undid the latch, took a deep breath, and opened the door just enough to allow Kellett into the room. Even from where Ainz sat, she smells like a winery. He barely kept his hand from covering his nose, but Kellett, seemingly aware of the situation, her hair unkempt, her clothing somewhat disheveled, made her urgency clear. "Forgive my appearance, Your Majesties," she said, blinking back tears as fast as they could form. "I would not trouble you with my lowly presence or appearance during an affair of state. But one of our investigators found something." "Found something?" Kalka asked as the flushed look of lust faded from her face. She glanced back at Ainz, who only shrugged. She then looked back at Kellett, who added, "Your Majesty, purging all the corruption has taken a great deal of time. And even after hanging the nobles, that still left all their documents. Some of our findings recently, they've pointed to a single source." Kellett swallowed as she won the war against her tears, the slain theocracy. "Here is a brief summary of some of the lines of evidence we have found. Bribes, currency exchange notes and more. This is just what we've found so far. The truth is, once we started finding it, knowing what to look for, it just kept piling up. Including evidence of a safe house in this very city. We're sending guards out there now." Kalka accepted the document and began to go through the quick summaries of findings as they were laid out, though reading did not stop her from objecting. But they're a sister state. Why would they? Queen Kalka's words went from the force of a flood to a dying trickle almost as quickly as they began. She glanced over to the Allfather in her bed. No. No, 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 no. Kalka uttered and shook her head violently back and forth. It can't be, it can't be. She almost shouted. What can't be? Ainz asked without rising from her bed. It's you, Kalka whispered with her mouth open and staring at Ainz as if he'd grown a second head.